Tofshin Ein Gimel. We are Sefer Mamar Tofshin Yud Aleph Tofshin Yud Beis. In the Mamar of Shabbos Pashas Bereishis Tofshin Yud Beis. Dibur Hamaschil Vayikach Havaye Elokim Adam. We are on page Kuf Nun Vov. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines from the top at the full stop, just after Vov Kuf, Vov Ktzavis. Right, we're up to Vehine. The Rebbe here is discussing the three concepts of Olam, Shana, and Nefesh, which is brought in Sefer Yetzirah. Firstly, I mentioned yesterday that I thought that the opening statement of Sefer Yetzirah is Olam, Shana, Nefesh. In fact, it is Sefer V'Sipur. But anyway, this Olam, Shana, Nefesh is also brought in Sefer Yetzirah. And as the Rebbe said in the Book of Formation, and as the Rebbe said, these three concepts are the foundation of the entire Seder Shtalshalos, the entire chain order of creation. Olam, Shana, Nefesh. Olam, world. First translate it literally. The world, or world. Shana, year. Nefesh, soul. It's another way of saying space, time, and life. And the Rebbe began to explain what these three concepts are. So these three concepts, Olam, Shana, Nefesh, are actually, as he said, the foundation stone, the foundation of the entire chain order of creation, but it's in ascending order, meaning Olam is the lowest, space, Shana, time, and Nefesh, the life force. So he started off by explaining that there is space in the physical sense and there's space in the spiritual sense, right? Space in the physical sense is the six edges of the world, as it were, right? Mizrach, Ma'ariv, Tzaf, and Dorim, Maila, Mata, north, south, east, west, up and down. And he said also in the spiritual dimension that is connected to the physical dimension of the world, there's also these six edges, as it were. Why? Because if they are grasped and apprehended by the physical, we're talking about the ruchnis shebegashmias, right? If this is a level of spirituality which is apprehended by the physical, it is subject to the constraints of the physical. So this is so far as what? The spiritual, which is apprehended by the physical. What about the ruchnius itself, which is beyond the spiritual, which is beyond the physical? That's what the Rebbe is addressing now. V'hinei. So, what did I say? 8 lines from the top by the full stop on page Kuf Nun Vav. V'hinei. Gam bechinas ruchnis she'eina mislabeshes begashmias, also in the spiritual dimension, which does not clothe itself in the physical dimension. Yesh ba gam ken bechinas vav ktzavis, it also has within it this concept, this characterization of the six edges. U'kmei b'inyan seichel, for example, when we talk about seichel, intellect. So although seichel is beyond the six edges, nevertheless, when this intellect is drawn down into comprehension, it does have edges. What is the idea of the six edges, or the edges, as it were, the defining features of the intellect? This is the idea of protei ha'hasage, the details of the comprehension. Those are the defining features of the seichel. So in other words, you have the seichel, the intellect, as it is beyond definition, as a nekuda, as a point, as it were. And then you have the seichel, the intellect, as it comes down into, it's fleshed out, right? Once it's fleshed out, it already has, that fleshed out seichel, the hasage, the comprehended seichel, is what are the defining features of it, and they are the vav ktzavis, the six edges. Obepratius him vav ktzavis. In detail, we're talking about six edges, six defining features of seichel. Why? Shahare prati ha'hasaga hem hamidas shebeseichel. What are the details of the comprehension? What are the defining features of the comprehension? They are the six. They are the midas shebeseichel. When you say defined seichel that is defined, an intellect that's defined, Another way of saying that is midos shebeseichel. Right? We know that there are the 10 koiches, the 10 faculties that the soul possesses, corresponding to the 10 spheres. What are they? Chochma bin adas, that's the intellect. Then you have chesed, gvura, tiferes, netzach, hoyd, and yisoid, those are the emotional aspects of the soul. And then malchus, which is the active aspect of the soul. We also know that in seichel, in the intellectual aspects of the soul, there are midas shebeseichel. Midas within seichel. What's the idea of midas within seichel? That is defined seichel is midas shebeseichel. For example, when you define the seichel, whether this intellect is being drawn towards chesed. For example, take Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Why did Beis Shammai usually paskin, that usually rule things as more strict, and Hillel ruled things as usually more lenient? Those are the defining features within the seichel. And every seichel, even before you become to a definitive point, the idea of refining the intellect, the thought, the intellectual process, as it were, right? When you start defining the seichel, whether this is an idea which goes in one direction or in another direction, those are midas shebeseichel. That's another term for the defining features of seichel. Another term for the defining features of the intellect is midas shebeseichel. So midas is the idea of defining.
Is it the midah operating through the seichel or the seichel operating through the midah?
The seichel operating through the midah.
But we've learned that really you have an emotional reaction to something.
We're not talking about emotional reactions. We're talking about the
root,
the direction in which the intellect is going. Is it going towards the negative? Is it going towards the positive? In other words, this is the idea. So what's the conclusion now? Is the conclusion, therefore, or not even the conclusion, just defining the idea. Is it a positive idea? Is it a negative idea? I don't mean positive and negative in the sense of kedusha and the opposite of kedusha, but different ideas have different characteristics. The defining characteristics of those ideas are the midas shebeseichel.
And this is coming from above intellect?
How do you mean?
Is it the intellect being colored by?
It's the intellect being colored. So the seichel before it is defined, the intellect before it's defined is beyond it. Once you start defining the seichel, that's already midas shebeseichel. So midas shebeseichel is another term for the process of defining the intellect.
When you talk about Shammai and Hillel, it's being defining aspects of Seichel. That sounds like Gevura and Chesed.
Correct, absolutely. That's why I'm saying Hillel is Chesed and Shammai is Gevura.
In the midas of Seichel.
Correct. So that's the starkest example of Seichel being defined. But in every intellectual process, you have this idea of defining it. You start off with a point. Now you have to start breaking it down and defining it. Where does it belong? Right? So you have the nekuda, the point, and then you have the definition, or the fleshing out of that point. So that's midas shebeseichel. Those midas shebeseichel are the vav k'tavos, the edges that he's referring to. Just like in the physical sense, you have space which is defined by the 6 edges: north, south, east, and west, up and down, right?
Planes, not edges. Planes.
Well, he calls it k'tavos.
Surfaces. 6 surfaces of the cube.
Correct. That's exactly what he's talking about, the surfaces of the cube. But the expression that's used is k'tavos. K'tzei means an edge. But that's
12 edges.
That's Yud Beis Gvulei Alachsen. That's something else. You're right. The diagonals, as it were, where they meet.
Edges, 12 edges of the cube.
Where they meet. In the cube, you have that's something else. That's Yud Beis Gvulei Alachsen.
Where they meet.
Correct. Where the right meets the front, and the front meets the left, and left meets the
edges.
and so on and so forth. That's Yud Beis Gvulei Alachsen. Now here he calls it Vav K'tavos, which you're right are the 6 surfaces. But strictly speaking, the word K'tzei means that. But that's the idea. So in Seichel, you have this idea also of what? The defining features of the intellect. Those are the surfaces, if you will, of the intellect.
Is this happening inside the person or above the person? Is it happening within our existence, or
Absolutely.
is happening already outside? This is what. So therefore, it's our own limitations of our own character.
Let's put it this way: this is not dependent on whether it's within the person or outside of the person. The neshama, even before it comes out of the body, also has a sogya. The neshama, the way it is lamayla, the way it is in Gan Eden, has a sogya as well, of a different order. It has intellectual comprehension, but of a completely different order. If you remember, we were speaking about before that what happens to the soul when it comes into the body is it has the power to see, the power to hear, even before. But the change that takes place is, whereas before it was only able to, or whereas before its seeing and hearing was spiritual, it saw and heard spiritually, and as he defined it, the godly experiences that take place above, or the announcements that are made, the daily announcements that are made in heaven. Once the neshama comes down into the body, it changes in the sense that the seeing and the hearing now becomes a physical experience. So it's all within the consciousness of the soul, but it depends on which level we're talking about, right? So, but the point over here is that he's saying that even ruchnius that is beyond gashmius, even the ruchnius that does not clothe itself in gashmius, is already possesses this idea of space. What's the idea of the space? The surfaces that define, for example, the intellect. Chesed, Gvura, and so on and so forth. And in detail, there's 6 surfaces, 6 edges. Because the detailed aspects of the comprehension are the midas within seichel, as we just explained. How many midas are there? 6. So in a sense, why are there 6 surfaces that define space? That's a derivative from the 6 midas that define the seichel. Now he says another point. So why is it olam? Why is it called olam, world? We know that the world is connected to space, right? The world is defined by space and time. But why are you specifically calling this idea of the 6 surfaces, or the 6 edges, the defining features, as world? So he says like this. The comprehension of the seichel, of the intellect, actually conceals the point, the essential point of the intellect. Therefore, you need to toil very hard, very strong, very much, in order to draw out the essential point, which he defines as nekudas ha'oir and nekudas ha'chayas, the point of the light and the point of the life. The essential point, in order to get to it, meha hasaga, from the comprehension. In other words, once the seichel is fleshed out and defined in these 6 surfaces, it's defined. In order to get to the point of where it all started, you have to work through all of that until you get back to the original point. Why? Because the actual, when you take the seichel and you flesh it out, yes, it's fleshed out and it's accessible, but it also has the characteristic that it conceals the essential point of the intellect. That's why the 6 surfaces, another reason why the 6 surfaces, or the 6 edges, as you said, Eddie, are called olam. Why is this defined as world? Not only because our world is defined by the 6 surfaces, but shehim eloshen helem v'hester. Olam is from the expression of concealment. Helem, concealment, v'hester, and being hidden. What's the idea? Because the idea of these 6 surfaces conceals the essential point of the life force. Just like when you look at the world itself appears as it is and conceals the fact that within it is embedded this tremendously powerful life force. So too, when we look at the fleshed out seichel, as it is defined in the 6 surfaces or 6 edges, the essential point of it is concealed, and because of that, it has this. It's because of that olam, which is the first of the 3, the lowest of the 3 aspects that the Sefer Yetzirah discusses, denotes what? Space, either physical space or space in the spiritual sense, as it is apprehended by the physical, or even spiritual space, as he just defined, which is what? Fleshed out ruchnius, for example, fleshed out seichel. So that's the idea of olam. Then he's going to go into explain what is the idea of nefesh, and then he's going to explain what connects nefesh to olam, which is shana, and then he'll explain that in avodas ha'adam, in man's service to Hashem. It's a bit of an intricate and involved idea, but we'll work through it patiently, and please God, we'll resume I'm not sure unless you hear from me otherwise. We'll have a little break because I'll be away now for after Shabbos perhaps. But until you hear from me otherwise, I'll email to tell you when we will resume.